Hey, what's up, YouTube? I am making this video, and I'm trying to make this video as neutral as possible, but I gotta say something, and I have been seeing nothing. I'm seeing extremes on both ends about this on Twitter, social media, reviewers from credited review sites, as well as content creators and things like that. And I'm hearing everything from this is the greatest game of all time to this is not my Final Fantasy. This is an abomination of a game. It is terrible, and this game should not be played. Okay, so then, as a normal person, when you're going through reviews, when you're looking at reviews for a game, you're trying to, if you're not on the fence of like, I'm absolutely buying this game no matter what, and I'm going to play it, you're like, okay, what do I need to read when I'm looking at reviews? For me, I look at bad reviews first, but then I read, why is it a bad review? If I'm looking at a 0 out of 10 rating and it's just like, this game sucks, and that's it, I'm like, I don't even count that. I disregard that. My mind is, boop, not counting that. Or if I'm like, it's a 10 out of 10, this game's great, that's it. I discount that as well. I'm looking at, why is it great? Why is it bad? And generally speaking, when it's coming to negative things, if it's related to performance or technical issues, I keep that in mind, but I don't count that against the game in terms of my own enjoyment. But that's just a me thing. For a lot of people, technical problems will be a determining factor as to why or why not they are going to play a game. So Final Fantasy XVI. I have not beaten this game yet, but I have about 35-ish hours into the game. I have done literally every single thing you can possibly do in the game up to this point that I'm at. Not going to spoil, no spoilers in this, but I want to talk about mostly a lot of the negative stuff I'm seeing. People are saying, this isn't Final Fantasy. This is not Final Fantasy. Okay, why is it not Final Fantasy? It's not turn-based. Okay. 7 Remake wasn't turn-based. 15 wasn't turn-based. 12 wasn't turn-based. There's been plenty of Final Fantasy games that are not turn-based. And for me personally, whether it's turn-based or real-time or straight-up action, I don't think that has anything to do with determining whether the game is a Final Fantasy game. Another thing, the RPG elements are very lackluster and practically non-existent, and they're placebo effects. Okay, I was actually really thinking about this one really, really hard. And I've come to the conclusion that I actually see merit in this argument. In the sense of strictly being that the RPG elements could be better. But that's not in reference to being, this isn't Final Fantasy. I don't think that's correct. You can say you don't like the fact, I understand like people saying like, I don't like the fact that the RPG elements are kind of, they're very shallow and they're almost, there's no point to it. When it comes to weapons and your gear, it's just weapons increase your damage and your stagger. That's it. As it goes up or down. You don't need to pay attention to the name, anything. It's just, is it higher or lower? That's it. Same thing with when it comes to doing the belt and bracers. Is it higher or lower in defense and HP? That's it. That's the only thing that matters. When it comes to your skills, I do think the skill system is not as bad as people are saying, especially later into the game. That being said, it could be better. It definitely could be better. But I don't think any of this has anything to do with saying, this is not a Final Fantasy game. To me, okay, what makes a Final Fantasy game? This entire video is my opinion, okay? So we can agree to disagree or whatever. That's totally fine. But Final Fantasy. What I'm looking at, strong characters. I'm looking at character development. And I'm not talking from, I'm leveling up, I'm getting stronger and all this kind of stuff. I don't care about that necessarily in the sense of like, this is a Final Fantasy game. I'm talking about it from a story perspective. My character growing. Final Fantasy IV, you have Cecil, right? Main character. He starts off as a Dark Knight. And throughout the story, he becomes a better person, and he develops, and you eventually fight your dark self and become a paladin or whatever. You become good. Warrior of Light rather than Warrior of Darkness. Kind of deal. Final Fantasy VII, a game that everybody loves and adores, right? The original Final Fantasy VII anyway, right? Cloud thinks he's somebody else, and, he slowly realizes who he is, and then you have the whole thing in Mideel about him going into a coma because he finally is realizing that he's not who he thinks he is, and his whole thing is all jumbled, right? And he comes to a realization. It's character development, character growth, and you have this with plenty of other characters. Final Fantasy XV, the previous game in this title, and people can say what they want about 15, okay? But I personally think Final Fantasy 15, especially with all the DLCs, I think the game is absolutely fantastic. It's probably in the top third of my favorite Final Fantasy games. The character development, not only of just Noctis, but of the other three characters, Prompto, Ignis, and Gladio, I think is absolutely fantastic. Because you see these people grow into better people. You see the bonding of the characters together, things like that. This is character development. Okay, what do we see in Final Fantasy 16? This is minor spoiler. I'm just going to talk about what was in the demo, essentially. You're seeing the development of Clive and his relation with his father, his brother, which is a positive relationship. But then you're seeing the negative relationship with him, and his mother, and this whole world building and all that kind of stuff. To me, that's Final Fantasy. Character development. Another thing, what makes Final Fantasy? Summons, icons. What else have they been called in the other games? I can't think of it at the moment. But I mean, you have Ifrit, you have Shiva, you have Phoenix, Titan, these kind of things. These iconic things that have been in Final Fantasies for a long time. You have a Cid in this game, okay? Cid is in all the Final Fantasies. The music, the emotional connection that you have to the scenes, how strong the music is, and this goes for pretty much any video game, really. Excellent and incredible music can make something that's average absolutely incredible. And Final Fantasy has always done this. Maybe not always. I can't remember from like the original 1, 2, and 3 very much, but I'm thinking back to Final Fantasy 4 because that was my very first Final Fantasy. It was Final Fantasy 2 in the US version on the Super Nintendo, but Final Fantasy 4, the boss music and the battle music, man, it gets you pumped, man. Like, that's what you want. You want stuff that's gonna you get that connection. Final Fantasy has done that so well in all the games. And this game is no exception. It is phenomenal. I haven't heard anything that's worse than this music's pretty good. That's been my worst reaction to any of the music in this game so far. Everything's been, this is pretty good, to this is the greatest stuff I've heard in years. Honestly, when it comes to music, the last game that I played that had music that rivaled this, and again, this is personal opinion, was the 7 remake music. Another Final Fantasy. This is the last time I heard music as good as that would rival this in a video game. And that's Final Fantasy, man. That's Final Fantasy to me. The fact that it's a fantasy. You have chocobos, you have all this stuff. And okay, this game is very political heavy. Final Fantasy XII was pretty political heavy. Granted, I think at that time there was a lot of controversy about the game of Final Fantasy XII because the combat is very reminiscent of the 11 MMO, and it was the first pseudo real-time combat. Okay, so we've gone over this stuff, and again, people might be talking about, okay, there's less customization when it comes to your combat. And I think that might be something a lot of people are complaining about as well. Okay, Final Fantasy XII, you had gambits. You could really customize the way your characters played. in this game, you play as one guy, and you essentially play the same way, even though you have a lot of options with your skills. You are kind of just mashing things, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I've been having a great time with the combat, but I can kind of understand people's qualms with combat being a little simplistic. That being said, I think part of that is because the game itself isn't very difficult in terms of like the main story stuff. I have never died in the main story or even come close so far. I have died in some side content recently, but I'm going to be playing the New Game Plus once I get to that, so I kind of want to see how much it pushes the customization of how to play in terms of the combat. And if we're talking just strictly based, and I was mentioning this earlier in this video, just critiquing the game itself, this is not a Final Fantasy game, but just the game itself. I do think, like I said, I was mentioning earlier, the RPG elements are a little light. And I think the combat is a little light, but that could also be a side effect of the fact that the game itself is just not very difficult. But yeah, I don't know, man. Enjoy the game. Just because it's got the Final Fantasy XVI title slapped onto it, enjoy the game. And if you don't enjoy the game, you don't enjoy the game. But don't be telling people, why are you liking this? I think that's another big issue that I've been having is people just complaining about, or like people who have a very negative view of the game that are getting upset at people for defending the fact that they do like the game. Don't yuck other people's yum, as somebody, shout out to Co-Carnage, says this phrase. But just don't do that. I mean, okay, you don't like it, fine. The game's not for you. Don't get mad at somebody else for liking the game. All right, I'm done ranting. I'm going to go play more of the game. Follow me on twitch.tv/smalldoor, and I play all sorts of RPGs and pretty much single-player games. All right, thanks for watching.